All right, get ready, because today we're diving deep into the world of Carl Jung and his theory of analytic psychology.
Oh, it's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, it really is. You sent over these excerpts on Jung's ideas,
Did.
especially this concept of the collective unconscious.
Right?
It's almost like something out of science fiction, isn't it? A shared unconscious mind.
It really does have that kind of mysterious ring to it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's so insightful and, it still resonates with psychologists today.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, we're also going to talk about these archetypes
Yes.
that Jung said we all have within us.
Yes.
Like, think about shadow selves or the anima and animus.
Right.
Like these figures that he said shape our experiences.
Exactly. And what's really interesting is that while Jung developed these concepts over a century ago,
Yeah.
they still provide this incredible lens for understanding our lives,
I'm ready to understand.
our relationships, even the human condition itself.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Let's start, just to kind of set the stage, with a little background on Jung himself. The text tells us that he was born back in 1875 in Switzerland. And he came from a deeply religious family.
Oh, wow.
Can you believe, 10 pastors in his family tree?
That's amazing. Like he was destined to...
I know. And he was always fascinated by dreams, even as a child.
It's like he was meant to explore the depths of the human psyche, you know what I mean?
Totally.
Yeah.
It's like it was his calling, right?
Yeah.
But he actually trained in medicine.
He did.
But you can totally see how that interest in the mysteries of the mind led him to psychology.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's fascinating, that journey.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where his connection to Freud comes in, right?
Exactly.
Sigmund Freud.
The father of psychoanalysis.
Yeah, they were close colleagues initially, but their ideas about the unconscious mind eventually diverged.
They did, yeah.
And Jung went on to develop his own school of thought, analytic psychology.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that is that
What
it was a pivotal moment in psychology
was it?
when they had their breakup, so to speak.
Oh, okay.
Because Freud focused on the personal unconscious,
Okay.
which is shaped by individual experiences.
Right.
Jung went a step further,
Hmm.
and he proposed this radical idea, the collective unconscious.
Whoa. Hold on. Stop right there.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
So you're saying there's a shared unconscious mind that connects all of us.
That's exactly what he was proposing.
That's mind-blowing.
I know.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So if this collective unconscious is like this universal library
Yes.
of human experience, what kind of books are we talking about?
Think of them as archetypes.
Archetypes.
Universal primordial patterns of thought and behavior
Okay.
that are passed down through generations.
Through generations, like we inherit them.
Yes, it's like inheriting blueprints for human experience.
Blueprints.
They're not literal memories, but they shape how we perceive and interact with the world.
Okay, so it's less about inheriting specific memories.
Yes.
And more about inheriting these tendencies to experience the world in a certain way.
Exactly.
Like we might not remember our ancestors' specific fears,
Right.
but we inherit a predisposition to fear in general.
Precisely. And you know what's amazing?
What?
We see these archetypes reflected everywhere.
Everywhere.
In myths, legends, fairy tales, religious narratives, even our own dreams.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so give me an example. Like, what's an archetype?
Take the hero, for example.
The hero. Okay.
Embodies courage and selflessness.
Right, like a classic hero.
But it also has a darker side,
Oh.
a potential for egotism and a thirst for recognition.
It's like this double-edged sword.
Yeah, exactly. It's like two sides of the same coin.
Wow, okay. So that brings us to one of Jung's most interesting, maybe even kind of scary concepts, the shadow.
Ah, yes, the shadow.
The text describes it as the part of ourselves that we repress or
Yeah.
deny.
Yes.
Like those less desirable qualities.
Your parts we try to keep hidden.
Yeah, from the world and even from ourselves, maybe.
Precisely. And it's potent because it speaks to our duality as humans,
Okay.
that good and bad, light and dark. And Jung thought that acknowledging our shadow, even though it can be uncomfortable,
Yeah.
is crucial for personal growth.
Okay, so instead of trying to be this perfect version of ourselves, it's more about recognizing and integrating those parts we might find embarrassing or even shameful.
Exactly. And what's even more fascinating is that
Right.
Jung believed we often project our shadow onto others.
What do you mean?
We see in them the qualities we refuse to acknowledge within ourselves.
Wait, are you saying that if I'm, like, always criticizing someone for being arrogant,
Yes.
maybe it's because I'm struggling with my own arrogance that I haven't dealt with?
That's exactly what he would suggest.
Wow, okay. That's a lot to think about.
It is, isn't it? Projection is a defense mechanism.
Okay.
It helps us distance ourselves from those parts of ourselves that we don't like.
That's interesting.
And this happens all the time in our relationships.
Does it?
Think about the coworker you just can't stand.
Oh, yeah.
What qualities in them really bother you?
I don't know. Maybe they're...
Could it be a reflection of something you struggle with yourself?
Wow, that's really interesting.
It is. It's a challenging question, but it can lead to so much self-awareness.
Okay, that's some serious food for thought.
It is.
Before we go too far down that rabbit hole, though,
Okay.
I want to hear more about these other archetypes,
Yes.
especially the Anima and Animus.
The Anima and Animus.
Yeah, so tell me about them.
Jung believed that each gender carries an unconscious image of the other within them.
Okay.
For men, the Anima represents the feminine principle, and for women, the Animus represents the masculine.
So you're saying we all have a little bit of the opposite gender inside us.
That's essentially what he proposed.
How does that even play out in our lives, though?
Jung thought it had a big impact on our relationships.
Okay.
Imagine falling in love with a projection of your own Anima or Animus.
Hold on. You're telling me our ideal type?
Yes.
Might actually just be a reflection of our own unconscious masculine or feminine energy.
Precisely.
Wow, that makes you rethink everything you thought you knew about attraction.
I know, right? And it can lead to complications.
How so?
Well, Jung felt we might be drawn to partners who embody qualities that we haven't fully developed in ourselves.
So it's less about finding a partner who completes us
Yes.
and more about finding someone who reflects back to us these hidden parts of ourselves that we need to confront.
Exactly.
Okay, that's heavy.
It is. But it's also a powerful idea, isn't it?
It is. It really is. I'm already seeing my own relationships in a whole new light.
I'm sure.
So I'm dying to hear more about how these Anima and Animus archetypes actually show up.
Oh.
Do they appear as people in our dreams?
Sometimes, yes. But they can also manifest more subtly as feelings or moods or even in the type of partner we're consistently attracted to.
So if I keep falling for the same type over and over again,
It could be a sign.
maybe it's time to look inward and figure out what that says about my own Anima or Animus.
Exactly. It's about recognizing those patterns
Okay.
and asking what they reveal about our unconscious.
This is already blowing my mind.
I know, it's amazing stuff, right?
It feels like we're barely scratching the surface here, though.
We are.
I'm ready to go deeper.
Let's do it.
If we look at some examples from the text,
Absolutely.
I want to hear how Jung explained the Anima and Animus in more detail.
Okay, let's start with the Anima.
Okay.
The feminine archetype within men. Jung believed it's formed from a man's early experiences with women.
Okay.
His mother, sister's early crushes.
Okay.
These experiences create a primordial image of woman in his unconscious.
So it's not about one specific woman,
No.
but like a composite image of all the feminine energy he's encountered.
Exactly.
Wow, okay.
And this anima can manifest in different ways.
Oh, so...
Well, he might project his anima onto a woman he finds attractive, unconsciously idealizing her, attributing qualities to her that may not even be real.
Oh, I've definitely seen that.
Haven't we all? It's like he's falling in love with a fantasy, not the actual person.
Totally.
And that can be a real obstacle in a relationship.
Yeah, because he's not really seeing her for who she is.
Right. He's blinded by this projection.
Makes sense. So how does it work with women and the Animus?
It's similar, but also different.
Okay.
The animus is that masculine archetype within women.
Right.
It's an image of man in her unconscious, shaped by her early experiences with men like her father or brothers.
Interesting. So the Anima and Animus are both shaped by these early relationships.
They are.
And they influence how we see and interact with the opposite gender.
Precisely.
Okay, so give me an example of how the Animus might show up for a woman.
It could manifest as a strong, opinionated voice in her head.
Like an inner critic.
Almost like that, yeah. It can also influence her attraction to certain types of men.
Oh.
Sometimes her choices and partners might even seem to contradict her conscious desires.
Wow, so the Animus can really pull the strings.
It can be a powerful force.
This is making me rethink everything.
Yeah.
So how do we even become aware of these Anima and Animus archetypes? Like, how do we spot them in our lives?
Well, Jung believed dreams were the royal road to the unconscious.
Dreams?
He'd say, pay attention to the figures and symbols in your dreams. They're messages from the deeper layers of your psyche,
Okay.
including those anima and animus archetypes.
So it's like our dreams are speaking this symbolic language
Exactly.
that we have to learn to decode.
That takes practice.
Okay, so we've got the collective unconscious, archetypes,
Yes.
the shadow,
Right.
the anima.
And dreams as a way to access these hidden dimensions.
It's like a whole different way of thinking about the mind
It really is.
than what we're used to.
Absolutely.
But we haven't even talked about Jung's idea of the self.
True. That's a big one.
Where does that fit into all of this?
Well, for Jung, the self represents the ultimate goal
The ultimate goal.
of psychological development. It's
At
a
least that.
lifelong process
A lifelong process.
of integrating all these different parts of ourselves.
So the conscious and unconscious.
Yes.
Masculine and feminine.
Right.
Light and shadow.
Exactly. All into a unified whole.
So it's not just about understanding these different parts,
No.
but actually weaving them together.
Precisely.
That sounds like a lifelong project.
It is. It's a journey.
A journey,
And-
not a destination.
You got it.
Okay, we've covered so much already.
We have.
And I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed, to be honest.
That's understandable.
But in a good way.
Good.
What stands out to you, though, as the most important thing so far?
I think what's most fascinating is how Jung's ideas connect to so many different areas of human experience.
Yeah.
From psychology and mythology to literature and spirituality.
I agree. It's like a whole new way of seeing the world.
Exactly. It's a framework for understanding these universal patterns.
I couldn't agree more. But I got to ask,
Yeah.
how do we actually apply all this to our lives?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. Like, it's one thing to understand this stuff intellectually, but it's another to actually see it in action in our own lives.
It is, and that's a question we'll explore further in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, I'm ready to bridge that gap.
Me too.
Are you?
Absolutely. I'm excited to see where this journey takes us.
Me too.
Let's do it.
Awesome.
Great. Welcome back to our deep dive into Carl Jung.
Okay, so we spent the last part talking about all this mind-blowing stuff.
We did. We covered a lot of ground.
Like the collective unconscious, archetypes, the shadow.
Yeah, all those foundational concepts.
But I'm ready to get practical.
Practical, okay?
How do we actually apply these concepts to our everyday lives?
That's a great question.
Like, the text mentions Jung's approach to therapy.
Right.
And I'm just curious, like, how did he actually help people access this deeper self-understanding?
Well, he developed several techniques. One of them was the word association test.
Word association test.
Yeah, he'd give a patient a list of words
Okay.
and watch their reactions, looking for hesitation or anything unusual.
So he's like a psychological detective?
Kind of, yeah. He was looking for clues about what was happening beneath the surface.
Like those hidden complexes or emotional charges.
Exactly.
It sounds like a way of uncovering those blind spots we all have.
Yes, that's a great way to put it.
Wow. So what else? What other techniques did he use?
He was also a big believer in dream analysis.
Dream analysis. Okay.
Jung saw dreams as a direct line to the unconscious.
Interesting.
You know, like a symbolic language expressing our inner world.
Okay.
He'd encourage his patients to keep dream journals, to pay close attention to those recurring symbols.
This is starting to make sense now.
Is it?
Yeah, like all these pieces are starting to fit together.
It's a big puzzle, isn't it?
It is, but it's fascinating. The collective unconscious, archetypes, the shadow, the animus, and now dreams as a way to access these hidden dimensions.
It's a whole different way of thinking about the mind.
It really is. It's like a whole new world has opened up.
And Jung wasn't afraid to explore those less traveled paths.
Like he wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo.
Exactly. He even developed a technique called active imagination.
Active imagination. Okay, now you've got my attention.
Imagine this. You start with an image, a feeling, a dream fragment, anything from your unconscious. And you just focus on it, let it unfold without any conscious control.
So you're not trying to analyze it, you're just letting it be.
Exactly. Letting the unconscious speak its language.
Wow, that sounds like a powerful tool for, like, creative exploration, too.
Absolutely. And Jung was fascinated by the connections between psychology and art.
Oh, right, because art can be a way of expressing those unconscious themes.
Precisely. It's like making those hidden dimensions visible.
I love that. It reminds me of something we talked about earlier,
What's that?
that idea of duality.
Ah, yes,
Yeah.
duality.
Like how each archetype has both positive and negative aspects.
Right, like that light and shadow we were discussing?
It seems like this idea of opposites being interconnected is really central to Jung's thinking.
It is. It's a cornerstone of his theory.
Like yin and yang.
Exactly. Jung believed that the psyche is a dance of opposing forces.
It's about finding that balance.
Yes, and recognizing that everything contains its opposite.
Okay, so we've talked about the shadow.
We have.
We've talked about duality.
Mhm.
But how do we actually integrate those shadow parts into our lives?
That's the real challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, it's easy to say, face your demons.
Well, what does that actually look like?
Exactly. So how do we do it?
Well, Jung believed therapy could be a big part of that process.
Therapy.
Through self-reflection, dream analysis,
Right.
all those techniques for exploring the unconscious.
Okay.
But even outside of therapy, there are things we can do.
Like what? Give me something practical.
A simple but powerful practice is journaling.
Journaling. Okay, I can get behind that.
It can be incredibly helpful.
Yeah, I've always found writing to be therapeutic.
It can be a way to process our thoughts and feelings to get them out of our heads.
But how does that tie into Jungian theory?
When we write down our thoughts, especially those that come up in dreams or emotional moments,
Yeah.
we can start to see patterns, recurring themes.
Oh, interesting.
And those patterns often point to the archetypes at play in our lives.
So it's like a decoder ring for our inner world.
I love that analogy.
So it's not just about venting our emotions.
No,
But using journaling as a tool for self-discovery.
exactly.
That's really cool. What else? What else can we do?
Pay attention to the stories and characters that resonate with you.
Okay, like in movies and books.
Yes, even in your own life.
Yeah.
Which archetypes do you identify with? Which ones are you drawn to or repelled by?
That's a great idea. It's like using pop culture as a mirror to
Exactly.
understand our own inner world.
And the goal isn't to put ourselves or others into boxes. It's about using these archetypes as lenses for understanding our experiences.
Lenses. I like that.
It's about gaining deeper self-knowledge.
Okay, so we've talked about the shadow. We've talked about duality. Let's bring back those anima and animus archetypes.
Okay, let's do it.
How do we become more aware of their influence in our lives?
Jung believed they often reveal themselves in relationships,
Relationship.
especially romantic ones.
Interesting.
We might be attracted to partners who embody qualities that we've repressed in ourselves.
So if I keep falling for the same type,
It could be a sign.
it might be my anima or animus at work,
Trying to show you something.
like nudging me towards qualities I need to develop within myself.
That's a very insightful observation.
Wow, that's pretty powerful stuff.
It is, and it's about paying attention to those patterns.
In our relationships.
Yes, to better understand ourselves.
Okay, but if we're projecting our anima or animus onto our partner, won't that lead to disappointment? Like no one can live up to those idealized images.
You're right, it can.
So how do we avoid that?
The key is to recognize those projections
Okay,
and then focus on developing those qualities within ourselves.
not looking for them in others.
Exactly. It's not about finding someone who completes us.
Right, it's more about using relationships as a catalyst for our own growth.
You got it. Relationships can be powerful mirrors, showing us what we need to work on.
That's a really powerful way to think about it.
It is, isn't it?
And it all ties back into Jung's idea of the self.
Yes, the self as a lifelong process of integration.
A journey, not a destination.
Precisely. And there's no finish line when it comes to individuation.
Okay, but didn't Jung also believe that our personalities are shaped by both nature and nurture?
He did. He don't dismiss the importance of our environment.
So it's not just about these archetypes.
It's more nuanced than that.
Okay, how so?
Jung saw it as a dynamic interplay.
Interplay, okay.
We might have certain innate tendencies,
Okay.
but those tendencies are molded by our experiences.
So it's like we're given a set of raw materials,
Yes.
but it's up to us to sculpt them into the unique individuals we become.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
I like that analogy. It feels empowering, like we have some agency in the process.
Exactly. We're not just passive products of our genes or our upbringing.
Okay, so how does all of this tie into his ideas about psychological types?
Ah, yes, the psychological types.
The text mentioned introversion and extroversion,
Right?
and then these different functions like thinking and feeling.
It can be a bit confusing.
It is. Like, how do all those pieces fit together?
Well, Jung said people have a natural tendency towards introversion or extroversion.
Okay, meaning they direct their energy inward or outward.
Exactly.
Got it.
He also suggested these 4 basic psychological functions.
Thinking, feeling, sensing, and intuiting. Right.
He got it.
But to be honest, those terms always kind of go over my head.
I understand.
Can you give me a real-world example of how they work?
Sure, let's say you're facing a problem.
Okay, a prop.
Someone with a dominant thinking function might approach it very logically.
Trying to break it down into smaller steps?
Exactly. While someone with a dominant feeling function might focus on the emotional impact of the problem.
Okay, like how it's affecting the people involved.
Precisely.
So it's not that one function is better than the other?
No, not at all.
It's just that we all have different strengths.
And different ways of engaging with the world.
That makes a lot of sense.
It does, doesn't it?
So how do we figure out our own psychological type?
There are tests, like the Myers-Briggs.
Oh yeah, the MBTI.
It can be a fun starting point.
Okay.
But remember, these tests are just a snapshot.
They don't tell the whole story.
Exactly. And for Jung, understanding ourselves goes much deeper than just fitting into a category.
It's like we're all complex individuals.
We are, with our own unique blend of these functions.
It's not about labels or boxes.
No, it's about embracing the richness of being human.
Okay, so we've covered the functions.
Mm-hmm.
How does all of this relate back to individuation?
Well, all of it, the archetypes, the shadow, the functions, they all play a role in that process.
The process of becoming who we're meant to be.
Exactly. And for Jung, individuation was the ultimate goal.
Okay, but it's such a big concept.
It
feels overwhelming. Like, where do we even begin?
Well, Jung believed there were certain stages we go through.
Stages. Like stages of individuation.
You could think of it that way, yes.
Okay, tell me more. I'm intrigued.
He saw childhood as a time of innocence.
Okay.
When our ego is forming.
We're learning the rules of the game.
Exactly, figuring out who we are in relation to our family.
Like little sponges, absorbing everything.
Precisely. Then comes youth, a time of exploration.
We start to separate from our parents.
Yes.
Experiment with different identities.
Trying to find our own path.
Breaking free from those early molds.
And then comes a crucial turning point. Middle age.
Middle age. Oh.
This is when we confront our limitations.
Our mortality.
Yes, and those big questions of meaning and purpose.
Midlife crisis time.
It can be, but it doesn't have to be.
Okay, so how do we avoid the crisis?
Jung believed that facing these challenges head-on leads to greater self-awareness.
So it's not just about decline.
No.
But also about transformation.
Exactly. It's about shedding those masks we've been wearing.
And embracing who we truly are.
Yes. And finally, Jung saw old age as a time of reflection.
A time for making peace with the past.
Harvesting the wisdom of our experiences.
And preparing for the ultimate transition.
It's a profound journey, isn't it?
It is. It really is. But how do we know if we're on the right track?
That's the thing about individuation. It's a very personal process.
Okay.
There's no one-size-fits-all answer. But one key indicator is a growing sense of wholeness.
Wholeness, okay.
Feeling more comfortable in your own skin.
More accepting of our flaws.
And more aligned with our values.
Like finding that inner harmony.
Exactly.
And as we individuate, we might also feel more connected to something bigger than ourselves.
Yes. To the collective unconscious, to nature, to the universe.
So individuation isn't just about personal growth.
Right.
It's also about finding our place in the grand scheme of things.
That's the beauty of it.
Wow, that's amazing.
It is, isn't it?
This has been incredibly insightful, but I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed.
I understand it's a lot to take in.
What have we missed? What stands out to you as the most important point?
I think what's most fascinating is how Jung's ideas connect to so many different areas of human experience.
Yeah, it's not just psychology, it's everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's mythology, literature, spirituality.
It's a framework for understanding the world and ourselves.
I couldn't agree more. And it's empowering to realize that we all have this capacity for self-discovery.
And integration.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But we've only just scratched the surface.
I know, there's still so much to explore.
There is, like those criticisms of Jung's work.
Right, and his ideas about spirituality.
And the transcendent.
Okay, well, I'm ready for more.
Are you?
Absolutely, bring it on.
Right, let's dive into those deeper waters.
Okay, so in the last two parts, we really got deep into Carl Jung's theories.
We did. We explored some pretty fascinating concepts.
The collective unconscious, archetypes, the shadow.
It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It is, and, you know,
yeah,
Jung's ideas can be a little out there, right?
They can. They challenge a lot of conventional thinking.
Like a shared unconscious mind. Universal archetypes.
Right.
It almost sounds too mystical to be true.
It does have that mystical quality, doesn't it?
It does. So it's no surprise that there's been some pushback over the years, right?
Absolutely. Jung's theories have definitely sparked debate and criticism.
I'm curious to hear more about that.
Okay.
What are the skeptics saying? Like, what are some of the main criticisms of Jung's work?
Well, one of the biggest criticisms is that his theories are hard to test scientifically.
Okay, I can see that.
Concepts like the collective unconscious,
Yeah.
they're inherently subjective. It's not like measuring something concrete like the effects of a drug.
So how do we really know if these concepts are valid?
That's the challenge, isn't it? Jung relied heavily on interpretation and personal experience.
Which isn't very scientific.
Right. It's more about a qualitative understanding of the human experience.
Than a quantitative one.
Exactly. And that can make some scientists uneasy.
I see how that could create some tension between Jungian psychology and more traditional approaches.
It definitely has.
There's also the criticism that Jung's emphasis on the unconscious could lead to a kind of determinism.
Oh, right. The idea that we're not really in control of our lives.
Exactly. If our actions are just these unconscious patterns playing out, what happens to free will?
It's a big question, and one that Jung grappled with himself.
Did he?
He believed that we do have free will,
Okay.
but it's always operating within these larger unconscious forces.
So it's like we're trying to steer a boat, but the current's always there,
Yeah.
pushing us in a certain direction.
That's a great analogy.
It's this constant dance between our conscious choices and those deeper currents.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder how much control we actually have.
It does, doesn't it? And there's another criticism,
Oh.
one that's quite sensitive,
Yeah.
and that is that Jung's ideas have been used by some to promote racist or sexist ideologies.
Yikes. Okay. I can see how that would be a problem.
It's important to remember that Jung was writing in a different time,
Yeah, over 100 years ago.
and some of his views reflected the biases of his era.
Okay, but how has his work been misconstrued?
Well, for example, his concept of the primitive unconscious has been twisted by some to justify discriminatory beliefs.
So how do we separate the good from the bad?
I think it's crucial to approach Jung's work with a critical eye.
Okay.
We need to acknowledge the historical context
Right.
and be aware of the potential for misuse.
But don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Exactly. To reject his entire body of work would be a mistake.
Because there's still so much value there.
There is. His insights into the human psyche are incredibly valuable.
Okay, so despite these criticisms, Jung's impact on psychology has been huge, right?
It has been. He's had a profound and lasting influence.
We've talked about his contributions to our understanding of dreams, personality, and the shadow.
Right. All of those are major contributions.
But what about his broader impact? Like, where else do we see his legacy today?
Well, his ideas have influenced fields like mythology, literature, and art criticism.
Oh.
For instance, his concept of the archetype.
Yeah.
It's now a common way to analyze stories and cultural symbols.
I can see that. It's everywhere.
It is, from movies and books to marketing and politics.
It's amazing how his ideas have permeated so many different areas.
It speaks to the power and universality of his work.
It does.
And we can't forget his emphasis on spirituality and meaning-making.
Oh, right. That was a big part of his work.
He believed that humans have this innate drive to connect with something larger than themselves.
It's like a spiritual longing.
Exactly. And he saw it as just as fundamental as our need for survival.
Makes sense. We're all searching for that sense of purpose, of belonging.
We are, and Jung saw this as essential to the human experience.
And that connects back to his idea of individuation, doesn't it?
It does. It's not just about self-discovery.
But also about connecting to something bigger than ourselves.
Exactly. Finding our place in the universe.
Wow, that's a powerful thought.
It is. And Jung believed that as we individuate, we actually become more capable of contributing to something larger than ourselves.
So our personal growth has a ripple effect on the world.
Precisely. It's a beautiful and hopeful idea.
It is. It really is.
So where does this all leave us?
That's a good question.
We've explored Jung's key ideas
We've looked at the criticisms.
and acknowledged his lasting impact.
What's the takeaway message for our listeners?
I think the main takeaway is this. Jung's work, even though it can be complex,
Yeah.
offers a powerful way to understand ourselves and the human experience.
It's not always easy to grasp,
No, and it's certainly not without its flaws.
but it encourages us to ask those big questions.
About who we are, why we're here, what it all means.
Questions that everyone has to grapple with at some point.
And Jung gives us a unique and insightful perspective on those questions.
I couldn't agree more.
And as we wrap up our deep dive into Jung,
Yeah.
I want to leave our listeners with a final thought.
Okay, what's that?
Jung believed that dreams were a key to understanding the unconscious.
Right, a way to access the wisdom of the collective unconscious.
Exactly. So pay attention to your
To
dreams.
those messages from the deep.
See what insights they offer on your own journey of individuation.
Because, as Jung himself said, the dream is a little hidden door in the innermost and most secret recesses of the soul.
So explore those secret recesses.
Listen to the whispers of your dreams.
And see where they lead you on your own unique path.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the incredible world of Carl Jung.